And one of my friends there very lovingly and kindly and gently just said, well, if there really is a God, certainly God could handle you literally saying, I don't know where to go anymore. I don't even believe in you anymore. Like, if there's really a God, that somehow must be okay. And it was the permission I needed. And what I realized is what happened is sort of the God that I had believed in died that day. I'm David, and in my 50s, pain has shaped me more than I ever could have imagined.
What do you mean by that? Pain shaped you.
Pain, it's interesting, my relationship with pain through my life, it's complicated, it's messy. When I was younger, pain was almost something to be avoided. And at some point, I realized pain could be embraced and included and integrated. But I think what I've realized in my 50s is that as much as I have included pain and embraced pain and learned how to feel within the context of community and relationships with people, there was still a part of me that was not accessible. Like I carried pain, and I think I felt like my pain is either too much for me, too much for others. There's an aspect of my pain that I must hide or not share with others. And I've had, I would say, rather than actively choosing to embrace pain and kind of have it work with me and I would work with it, life happened in such a way that it squeezed me, it pushed me, and it brought my pain front and center for multiple years. And it's only through that multiple year process that I've really begun to understand the benefit of it. And so I would say one of the hallmarks of what I could say right now is that pain, I'm grateful for it. It's a gift. And part of a specific piece of that pain, because pain is kind of broad, but I'm maybe more specifically, I could talk about humiliation. So humiliation has taught me more than anything. And I think my whole life I've never wanted to be humiliated, and I've tried hard to perform well and to do well at tasks and with my vocation and relationships to just kind of reach a threshold of being enough and doing enough on some level, unfortunately, through other people's eyes, how they viewed me. That somehow, if the way that other people viewed me kind of tapped something inside of me, I would be enough and I would be okay. And I think I'm chuckling because I think I succeeded at that. And I say that in jest. I succeeded up through about my early 50s. And at that point, it couldn't carry me any longer. This idea that performing for others or having external approval. And so, what I can say at this moment is I've had an ego that, and when I say ego, I even go to kind of fine tune that to say my identity has unfortunately, up through my early 50s, been contingent on my performance and what I thought at least other people thought of me.
You know, you talk about pain when I think about the first thing that comes to mind when I think about pain is physical pain.
Yeah.
What it sounds like you have a very complex understanding of pain. Can you define pain?
Yeah, and I think emotional pain in many ways is worse than even some of the physical pain that I've experienced. I think because I know about trauma. So let me just say this, like our bodies hold trauma. And so for me, emotional pain is literally in my own body not feeling okay. Like something and sometimes not just not okay, that the soul aches. The soul, I mean, something in my body, and I will be even more specific. For me, sometimes when I hurt the most, there's almost a bodily sensation that comes up through my gut, my chest, up through my neck, and into my face, and almost behind my eyes. And what I've realized is when I notice that and lean into that on the deepest level, there's just tears. And I think what my fear has been is that to let that out. How will I manage that? What would other people do with that? And there's almost been a fear to let that out. So you're asking about pain, and pain is just this not feeling okay. Really, I mean, that sounds strange to say, and it's hard to fine tune it more than a bodily experience. Maybe sad, for me at least, that pain has a deep sadness that accompanies it. Um, I mean, I think when I was younger, I had a lot of rage and anger that would sat out in front of that. And then, I got into the decades of my 30s and 40s, and I had more and more access to the sadness. And then in my 50s, like, I've gone through basically an ego brawl, an ego death, like a 6-year fight with myself. And part of how I would describe the fight with myself is show the world you're enough, show the world you're okay. And the humiliation, I'm going to have to tie that back in, but the humiliation was I'd gotten, the specifics aren't even important. What mattered to me is that I desperately wanted that approval from significant people. And I was getting feedback from both people over me and under me that my job performance, how I was showing up, was not adequate. It was not helpful. In other words, the truth of the matter, I was viewing that through the lens of failure. And it even might have been viewed by others externally through the lens of failure. But I had never encountered failure on that level. And so for me, then, failure and humiliation were two sides of the same coin. Again, this is just David's soul and how I operate and how it works for me. But that humiliation, like, I guess I'm trying to even define humiliation, but almost feeling devalued and having a lowered status in the eyes of others. Like, I'm no longer viewed here, I'm viewed here. And it's not pretend, it's not a figment of my imagination, it is actual reality. Real people are viewing me and seeing me in a lower status. And my ego at that point and the pain that I had carried was not able to manage that. And the best way I would describe it, that pain then moved sort of from kind of being hidden from view some of the time to being out in front. And no matter which way I turned, no matter which way I looked, I could not avoid this.
Would you say that a lot of the pain you refer to is tied into not feeling okay with who you are?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. It's that how I am, there's something more I need to do or attain. I need, and again, either performance or attainment or something that would ensure how I'm viewed. Again, it was that sort of, unfortunately, a very outside in view instead of living out of abundance and being okay and being grounded in enough and just feeling loved. Right. And I will just say this, and I can be very specific about the wound that I carry. I'm very clear about what that is. And if I would have put it in an I statement, it would be, I don't matter. I'm not important. And maybe a third, a tri piece of that would be, I'm not wanted. And so when you're carrying that wound, I think I was always trying to compensate for it. And on some level, vocationally, I had reached a level of success and achievement where I was really actually compensating for that because it's like, look, there's evidence. I'm wanted. I'm important. I'm okay.
Where do you feel like that idea of I don't matter, I'm not wanted, Where did that originate?
Yeah, I can clearly see that as a wound from childhood, right? So this is a thread that goes back to my family of origin. And I know my parents were not intending to give me that message, but through lots of different iterations of neglect and abuse, and kind of my dad was somewhat passive. Like, I just began to see things through the lens of I'm not important. So that I would say that, I probably felt that way. I mean, this is sad to say, probably as early as 3 to 4 years of age, like that the wound had been created. And one of the interesting things, I want to talk about this for a second, which is interesting, is I had to really focus on something because a lot of people in sort of church settings would say, well, that's a lie. You are important. And what I began to realize is that no, the fact of the matter is, in my family, that wasn't a lie. That was a lived reality for David. Now, existentially on a larger scale and just sort of deep in sort of how I fit into the universe, yes, I do matter. I'm important. But I literally had to work through a real wound. It wasn't just a devil whispering a lie in my ear. It was a lived experience of I don't matter. I'm not wanted. Um, and I will just say this, it was a lived experience in the sense that as a 3 to 4 year old, that's the sense that I could make of my environment. And now as an adult, I can look back and see things where my parents did things and that were enough. I mean, they weren't chronically abusive. So in other words, I'm not just saying my childhood was just utter pain and chaos. There was some of that, and there were some really, really good things too. But that particular wound permeated and sort of affected my ability to see myself accurately. So yeah, I can quickly and easily tie that back. And I've been working with that wound. And what's really interesting, and it kind of gets back to so what's the work of pain? What does pain do? How has it helped me? Well, here's where. And I would even say this is just over the past maybe 90 days to 6 months. But what it is required of me is not to just sort of believe true statements like I am enough or I am wanted or I am important. It's required a depth of soul work where I would literally wake up in the middle of the night and have anxiety and fear. And again, this wound is sitting in front of me. I am not important. And there was no level of surrender. There was no letting it go. The only thing I could do with it is to literally come alongside myself. In other words, to treat myself the way God treats. I couldn't even offload this on. It's like, God, come tell me it's like, what I literally had to do was sit with myself and just have conversations. David, let's just talk. So it was almost like I was talking to the wound. I was talking to the injured part of me. And I was saying and doing and comforting and soothing. I'm getting emotional here. A part of me that I'd never touched. But it is a part of me that needed to be touched, but it was like off limits. But the humiliation brought this front and center for so literally years, to the point where it's like not that I must work with it, but if I'm going to flourish and have kind of the second half of my life be good, I want to work with this. I want to come in and find out where this wound actually is, what it looks like. And so the way I would describe it is I've spent, it's almost as if a friend had come to me and said, oh my God, I'm just hurting. Could you sit with me for a little bit? Could you pray with me? Could you hang with me? Could you spend some time with me until I begin to feel a little bit better? I'd never known how to do that until my 50s. And I learned out of necessity. But it's almost as if the wounded part of me woke me up at night and said, David, I can't sleep. I need you. Come alongside me. Please, I need you. And and I was able to respond and I was able to be there. So I might sit up with myself for 90 minutes, 2 hours, just talking. And sometimes I'm just coming close enough to the pain where just tears slowly just sort of leak out and drip out. And I would hang with myself until there was relief. But what I'm realizing is that the thing I've been looking for is here. It's not there. It's not out there. It's not in a job. It's not in a performance. It's not in someone externally accepting me or saying you're important or you matter. And let me just clear something up. It's not like I don't need those things. I do. I need to be in community. I need people. And it's a big and here. And I need to be doing that work too, because if not, I'm just going to burden everyone around me with that need, and it's never fully going to be met until I show up for myself. So I think that's the gift, is that I've learned to show up for myself. And I guess the other thing I would say, and it may sound very secular and non-spiritual maybe, but I've engaged in a lot of spiritual bypassing. In other words, going around, just let this one go, or just trust God. And what I really came to realize is I don't know what that even means. To just trust God with this wound, and maybe this is the work of the Spirit, is that I learned how to treat myself the way God treats me and sees me. Like, I didn't know how to do that until my 50s. And I'm kind of excited because I have a lot of life left to figure out how to do this better and better and to enjoy my life more and more. And maybe in some small way to share that with other people, the sort of this light that's here, this abundance that's here, this healing that's here, and even sparks of joy. Because I'll be honest, it was only until the past week where I was listening to someone actually talk about humiliation in a conversation that I was like, it's joy now. I'm like, oh my God, how does humiliation and joy go together? I was running from humiliation like my life depended on it. And now I can actually say I'm grateful.
Can you kind of share a little bit about that humiliation you're talking about? How did it play out, and kind of how you processed it, felt it?
Yeah, I think for me, and again, without specifics, in naming people, but I was in what I would just call a middle management position, and my supervisor and the people under me were both giving me critical and negative feedback. And ultimately, I felt like for the sake of the organization and for the sake of my own well-being, I felt like, for all intents and purposes, if you think of a situation where there'd be a vote of no confidence, even though it wasn't formally, people didn't write out, but the immediate environment around me, all were saying, no confidence in your leadership, no confidence in you. And it broke me. And I think part of the reason it broke me, and not everyone will be broken by something like this, but David was. I think part of the reason it broke me is because I was all in. I had given it everything. I was like, and I think in many ways I had held back on giving, it's like, because if you give it your all and there's a negative appraisal of it or it doesn't work out, it's like, ooh, so there have been times I had performed and given and done things, but it maybe was 85%, 90%. And I never wanted to be like, but I had made a decision. I'm all in. I'm going to learn I'm going to be the best at this that I could possibly be. And I naively thought that I really possessed the skill set to do it well. Or could be in a position to keep learning and growing in that and eventually get good at it. And what I basically got feedback was, no, this really isn't for you. And I do look back, but part of my ego was connected to that all in. Like I had put a lot of my self-esteem and identity and my importance and being okay and being wanted. I put those eggs in this basket of a leadership position. And, you know, and at the time, I didn't have conscious awareness, self-awareness that that's exactly what I was doing. It's only in hindsight that I can see that. But you're asking kind of how this played out. I just could not, I wanted to tell that humiliation and I wanted to tell that negative appraisal that was coming in. They were all kind of mixed together. I couldn't separate them. I wanted to basically protest and say, you're wrong. You're wrong. No, no. And I think that on some level, that's where the 6-year brawl was. It was like, and I don't know if the answer is to go back and just finally say, you're right, but it's just to accept all of that as it was. That happened. That appraisal came. The idea that this isn't a good fit, David, this isn't what you're good at. When I'd been all in and hung so much in that, it just was brutal to the ego. So I think what pain has left me with is I'm just ordinary. I'm frail. I mean, yes, I can be strong. But like I can hold together the complexities and almost seeming dichotomy of what it means to be human. I'm frail and I'm strong. I'm weak and I'm strong. I'm sensitive and easily offended and yet a peacemaker. It's like all these things that I didn't know could go together. So it's just an acceptance of my limitations, my smallness, and that everything I try, I might not be good at, or everything, And so I think I'm going to be my ego is going to be less invested in something external. It's less invested in something happening. And I really do hold in my body a little bit more peace, a little bit more ease, a little bit more okay. And really what that matters is I'm okay right now, just as I am with my limitations. And I think the gift is sort of an urgency and almost an inner push to perform or achieve. It's not that it doesn't exist anymore. I still have an ego. It's just a lot smaller.
Can you remember the first time where you really gave it that 100% and faced that rejection?
Yeah. I
Because you bring up a good point. You say, and you're not alone in this,
yeah.
or the idea that if I don't give my all, then you can always fall back. If you get a negative response, you can always fall back on, well, I didn't give my all. So it takes a lot of courage and putting yourself out there to say, I'm going to give my all, because if I get that negative feedback, I gave my best and it wasn't enough. It sounds like you did that with this specific instance. Was there a time ever before that, maybe in your childhood, that you said, I'm going to give it my all?
Yeah, that's cool. Growing up, I mean, I, it's really interesting because giving it my all and holding like that, there's some, that does connect with my childhood and my trauma. I do think, honestly, in my childhood, there was a giving up of something. And when I say giving up, I gave up on me. I gave up on trying. I gave up on trying to do well. So throughout my childhood, especially when I got to high school, I was a total underachiever and underperformer. And so I just slid by on just sort of existing. So I didn't really try again. I didn't really try again until I was in the Army. So in all honesty, I stopped trying because trying and giving it your all, I learned was risky and horribly painful and there was no reward. So interestingly enough, this isn't tying some things together for me here. So when I was in the Army, I tried again. I gave it my all and actually succeeded really well. I was for a period for the 8th Infantry Division. I was stationed in Germany, but I was a runner-up for Soldier of the Year. There were just several things where it was like, oh, giving it your all pays off. And I began to learn how to give it my all in academic sort of areas. And I ended up in higher ed and I ended up with a doctorate. So I had a lot of successes along the way. It's really interesting. When I first got injured, and I don't know why this is coming up right here, but I actually went to a chaplain at the university where I'm employed, and I shared with him how humiliated I was, and he was so kind. His response was just amazing. He says, "Oh, you've never really had anything that just sort of upset your apple cart." That wasn't his words exactly, but sort of like he could just tell. It's like when you've given it your all, it's always worked out. You've never had a situation where you gave it your all and you just fell on your face. I was like, you're right. That's exactly right. And so he gave me some insight into what I was facing, but facing it has been the hardest thing I've ever done. So, yeah.
You said that you were an underachiever in high school, and you kind of decided, I don't want to give it my all because there's risk and there's pain. Well, what taught you that? Where did you get that message that giving it your all is risky and painful?
I mean, it's simple, and it brings me into sort of my little boy self that was injured. It was like my mom was really harsh and critical and really did not know how to connect with me. She honestly had a very narcissistic personality, so she was never able to tune in or be attuned to anything going on with me. So as I would just show up as my little kid full self, what I realized is being all in with my full self was never acceptable. And I would just say the older I got and the more I developed my own personality and wishes, wants, desires, the more there was conflict with my mom. And so basically it was risky and unsafe to be myself. And so that's part of, I think, where I developed, I'm not wanted. Like, if I show up as myself, I'm not wanted. I'm not acceptable. So I can clearly see where that, so is very much learned. So that's why I gave up. And then I think away from home, that's why the Army became a new place to experiment. What would it be like to show up in this place and give it my all? And guess what? I was affirmed. I was accepted. I received some of that external validation. So unfortunately, while that was great on some level, spiritually, it wasn't. I was able to bypass the necessary development and healing to address those deep wounds. And I began to learn as early as the Army, hey, if you achieve, you perform, you give it your all, people are going to give you the affirmation you need. And that had worked all the way up to my 50s. That's really the story of what I'm talking about here.
Wow. So you're
7.
57 years old, and um, what have you learned about what you have believed your whole life from this situation?
Oh my goodness. This gets deep into some deep waters. Well, there's a couple things, you know, that on some level, it's categorically and existentially untrue that I'm unwanted and unimportant. I mean, I can say I am wanted, I am important. But what's also very interesting is I don't know how to tie this in. It's kind of complicated and it's messy, but I'll just say this because it kind of relates to where I am. But about 2.5 years ago, the theology that I had developed, which I think in some ways my conception theologically of God mapped on in some ways to how I probably saw myself and saw my mom and saw others, that that at the end of the day, performance, achievement, accomplishment, and having external approval and praise is really the best we're going to do in this life. And it sounds strange to say that, but I really think if you pin it all down, that's probably what I believed. And the fact is, when that didn't work, because I think my theology was tied in with that, I got mad at God. I mean, really mad and disappointed and frustrated. How is this not working? I've done, I've played by the rules I thought I was supposed to play by. What now? So not only, so this shattering was just a shattering of every dimension of my theology, my God conception, my self conception, my relationship with how I viewed vocation and work, everything. Oh, yeah. So coming back to the theology, that's kind of where I was going. Is I had a day where I was hanging out with some guys. This is an intimate group of people with the church where I was going, and we would hang out and have really important conversations. Sometimes we would just talk about what's awesome on Netflix. Other times we would go to the deepest level of our existential and spiritual issues and crises, and just our longings, our questions, our fears. It was a safe place. And I remember, boy, it felt so scary because what I'm realizing, beliefs matter, but the guiding beliefs that had carried me up through my mid 50s weren't going to carry me another day. And I began to speak this aloud. And one of my friends there actually has a Master of Divinity, had done some pastoring and ministering. And I just said, I don't know if I mean, I was freaking myself out saying it. And it's strange to say now. It's like, the God that I've believed in, I don't know where this God is. It's like, I can't go a day forward beyond this. And he very lovingly and kindly and gently just said, well, if there really is a God, certainly God could handle you literally saying, I don't know where to go anymore. I don't even believe in you anymore. Like, if there's really a God, that somehow must be okay. And it was the permission I needed. And what I realized is what happened is sort of the God that I had believed in died that day. And I probably went about 3 to 4 months. I didn't pray. I didn't feel like I was having faith in much of anything, but I was just living. And probably 4 months after that, I mean, it's so interesting. I literally have a vision right now. It felt like I was looking at sort of arid, barren ground. And the best way to describe it, like little green plants starting to pop up. And I'm looking around going, what's this? Where's this coming from? Oh, so much. I didn't do anything. I didn't perform. I didn't believe something. I didn't not believe something. I didn't do anything. And the gift of life just emerged. It looks different now than my faith did. It's much less certain. It's way more messy. God is unboundaried and unboxed. It doesn't fit anywhere.
Where does God fit into your pain?
I think what I would say now, if the theology that God lives in us is true, which I think it is, in those moments when I'm coming alongside myself, when I was describing at night, just being there, noticing and just being with me in my deepest angst and pain. And I think when I was looking at me, And in my own pain, I'm looking around, it's like, oh, God, you're here. You're not out there. You're right here, already here with me. Like, I think God, like, the surprise was, oh, God beat me, beat me there. It's like, oh, you're already here. And this is where you are leading me. You are leading me to face my pain and to truly to love myself in a way I never knew how to do. And quite frankly, love myself in a way that I had never been loved by anybody. Because the truth of the matter is, while I might be loved well by other people, no one really knows David like David does. And so I'm really best equipped to sort of administer the love of God, can only be really administered by me in its best and most potent form. And yes, there are times yes, there are times I need other people. And I mean, the perfect example was the conversation where the person gave me permission to let go of something and to explore and see what happens next. I dare say he probably had a similar experience and that's the thing. It's like we're all just giving and receiving and, giving love, receiving love, going through things, sharing with others, learning from others. And I think I just don't have to have it figured out. I think that's the thing. I don't have to have a neat and tidy theology that has it all, where it all makes sense. I think what matters most is that I love myself and I love others, and that I do that in increasing measures that are actually experienced by people, that are experienced by, for myself, I need to love myself in ways where I feel loved, and I need to try to do that with others.
If you could go back to before you begin this whole journey of discovering pain, discovering that belief of performance and just all of that, what would you tell yourself?
On some level, I think I would tell myself what I've always needed to hear. I think two things. If, like, way early on, I would have heard these words and it would have sat with me. Some version of David, you are enough and you are important. And I would go so far, probably add something on top of that. You're just amazing just as you are. And by amazing doesn't mean that I have awesome talents and skills and can perform, but just how you are human. The fact that you're breathing is amazing. And I think the second thing, it'll all turn out okay. It'll be okay. Yeah. So I think if I had heard some of those things, I could have weathered some of the storms, and that really could have potentially been a different trajectory. However, and what's interesting is that, strangely enough, God is able to include tragedy, heartache, pain, and trauma, and we can learn from that and grow in that and experience love in that. That's really a miracle when I think about it. Like, some of the tragedies of life give birth to grace and love and healing.
I'm gonna need you to imagine for this question. If your life was a movie and you watched it, what would you say about the main character?
He's it's the thing that I said, that last thing that I wanted to add on. I would say he's amazing, an amazing guy who doesn't give up, who is persistent and unrelenting in being curious and growing and learning, even from life's tragedies and adversities. Look at how he's learned from that. Look how he's grown from that. Look what he has done with what has happened. That's, I think, what I would say. Yeah.
How does that make you feel?
Mm. Yeah, right now there's just like a deep sense of peace. Like the very thing that I most long for. It's like, yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. You know, and I think that's almost a universal truth that if we could all awaken to that, we would there'd be fewer wars, fewer conflicts, less violence, less stepping on each other and hurting each other because we're all doing that because somehow there's some version of what I've talked about not happening, you know. Yeah.
My last question.
Hmm.
I've asked this to a number of people, and I'm really starting to like this as the last question. But if you had one final tweet, you're in airplanes going down, what is that?
It's interesting. I don't know that I would give any encouragement to people. I mean, I don't even know that I would. I mean, on one level, I would like to tweet, you know, to my family, I love you all. But I think what I would really say, isn't life amazing? Isn't life a gift? Something like that. It's been a great ride. You know, some tweet that includes something like that.
Hmm. I love it, David. You're incredible.
Mm.